This podcast is a production of Transworld Radio UK. For more information, go to our website at twr.org.uk. Hello and welcome to The Exchange here on TWR UK. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm James Maidment-Fullard. Today we're going to be hearing the story of a Christian who lost her faith, only to go on and find it again. But this story is slightly different because the lady that lost her faith happened to be a church army evangelist at the time, who, if she admitted to losing her faith, would have to give up her home.
I think a lot of us, when we have difficulties in our lives, we throw questions at God. Why? Why did this happen, God? Why does this happen? Why didn't that happen? And even on the cross, Jesus said, why? Why have you abandoned me? And I think that's normal part of human existence when you have a difficult time. Only I wasn't sharing these things with people, really. I was keeping them to myself. And I think that's partly because of my position as an evangelist. You're sort of wondering who should you go to when you start questioning God.
Today's guest is Lynda Alsford, the author of the book He Never Let Go. Lynda describes herself as a church army evangelist who temporarily lost her faith. I'm pleased to say that she found her faith again, and I'm also pleased to say that I had the opportunity to speak to her recently, and I'm going to play you the conversation that I had with her today. I began by asking Lynda about her faith before her struggles.
I've always been involved in weekly Bible study groups. I'd done a beginner's course when I first went to All Souls, Langham Place, and had a really good grounding from there in what being a Christian meant and what it meant to understand about giving your life to Christ and what he'd done for us on the cross. As I said, I've been regularly involved in Bible study groups, helping out with creches. I'd been to Bible college twice and got more training. I'd been filled with the Holy Spirit. I'd started sharing my faith with people. I used to be part of the evangelistic team at the hospital where I trained. I trained at the Royal London Hospital as a nurse many years ago, and I was part of the evangelistic team that started sharing our faith to all the new groups of student nurses and student doctors. So sharing my faith and being involved in my local church has always been a very strong part of my life.
And as an evangelist, your job was in the church, wasn't it, as well?
It was, yes. I'm a church army evangelist. I trained for 3 years in Sheffield, and in 2003 I started my first post at a church in Hounslow in Middlesex, and then moved to a church in Chiswick. And both churches sharing my faith was very important, witnessing to people on a one-to-one basis and in groups, preaching. So I was paid to talk about the gospel and, to live it out, so set as an example as well.
As your life was going on, you were involved in those jobs, those volunteering projects, the job at a church, working with the church army. Did you see your fall from faith coming? Was it obvious, or did it kind of just hit you all of a sudden?
It came up very gradually. I think a lot of us, when we have difficulties in our lives, we throw questions at God. Why? Why did this happen, God? Why does this happen? Why didn't that happen? And even on the cross, Jesus said, why? Why have you abandoned me? And I think that's normal part of human existence when you have a difficult time. Only I wasn't sharing these things with people, really. I was keeping them to myself. And I think that's partly because of my position as an evangelist. You're sort of wondering who should you go to when you start questioning God. And partly because when I did share it, I didn't get the support I really wanted or needed. One of the problems was a problem with ongoing singleness and what that means for not having children. And the responses I got from churches wasn't always helpful. People who cared desperately for you, but basically I wasn't getting the support I needed, and then didn't look for the support I needed. So it's a sort of a two-way coin, really, and I was digging myself into a deeper hole by not sharing it and trying to cope on my own and just ignoring any doubts when they came rather than facing them full on, admitting them and talking them through with someone. So it was sort of little by little it eroded my faith.
And it's important for us to emphasise here, you were in, when I read this bit in the book, you're in quite a difficult position because you worked within the church setting, you're house at the time was linked to your job. If you'd have admitted that your faith was going or was gone, you would have lost pretty much everything, wouldn't you?
Yes. It's quite a difficult position when you're working for a church or any job which is tied accommodation. Your accommodation is directly provided by your employer and you're required to live in it so that you can do your job properly. Had I admitted that I was going through this time, you can't really be an evangelist if you don't believe what you're preaching anymore. It's sort of, it takes away the whole point of being an evangelist. As an evangelist, you're sharing what you believe, and if you no longer believe it, you would have to leave the job. And I didn't want to be forced to leave my job really quickly. I wanted time to think about it, so I just kept it all hidden because I didn't know what that would mean for me. What would I do instead? Where would I go? And you're technically making yourself homeless and unemployed when you hand in your notice. It's quite a big step, especially when you're having doubts as well. And I've been a Christian since I was 18, so my whole adult life I've had a faith as a support, and suddenly found myself with what I thought was no faith left and no means of support, or not knowing how to get the support because I didn't believe in God anymore. And the church keep wanting to pray for you, and I didn't want to pray to a God I didn't believe in at the time.
This mountain's high, too high for us. This mountain's high, too high for us. This mountain's high, too high for us. This mountain's high, too high for us.
Let's go back just a bit in your journey and talk about, it struck me as the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like, and it was a conversation you were having with a friend in church where you didn't really admit there was a problem, did you? But you broke down. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, that was a lovely lady, and she just asked me how I was. And she did know a little bit of background. She knew that I was struggling with singleness and that I was finding some things hard. But she just asked me how I was in the coffee area one day, and I couldn't hold it back. Suddenly everything that was there, all that pain I'd held back, just had to be let out. And she took me back into the back of church and she sat me down and she just took my hand and she said, just cry it out. I'm here. Jesus is here. Just let it out. You're safe. And I just howled, and I howled and I howled. It must be nearly an hour or more. And she just sat there holding my hand, bless her. And I think it was amazing what she did, but it was the straw that broke the camel's back, as you say, because it was just too much pain for me to handle in one go. And with hindsight, I should have let that pain out as it went on, in little stages, rather than keeping it all locked in. And then when the floodgates opened, it just burst the dam. Tell
me about what it was like for you working as an evangelist with no faith.
Oh, gosh, that was awful. I felt I was living a lie, and I couldn't be who I was, constantly on guard when I was with people in my job role, because I didn't know whether I would accidentally say something that would give away what I was really thinking. So it was really hard work, having to say in Bible studies I was leading something that I completely believed to be untrue. And I devised a way of allowing people to just talk around the Bible passage without me giving any input. And I would just allow everybody else to talk about it. And fortunately, I got through a lot of it that way. But it was preaching the sermon. I couldn't get anyone else to preach the sermon. The congregation don't preach to themselves. You have to do that bit. So that was really, really hard. Even just preparing it and having to write down the notes of what I was going to say, and it's constantly, this is a lie, and it was like trying to be two people at once.
You weren't using the church either. You were trying to find another job at the time.
I was gradually starting to look for work, but it wasn't until that Christmas 2009, when I was preaching at the main carol service, that it really hit me full on that my faith had completely gone. And at that point, I had to choose to leave. And as I stepped down from the pulpit, I thought, I have got to get out of here. And that's when I seriously started looking for work, desperately, because I knew I couldn't stay. For the church's sake and for my sake, I had to go.
I've spoken to friends of mine who, when I was at school with them, they had a really strong faith, and now they would call themselves strong atheists. And they said that the doubt was horrible, and it was like a chain that was around them. But when they finally took that decision to drop their faith, that chain just disappeared and they felt better. Did you find it was the same for you?
At first, yes. It took longer to let go of the church. I was still going to church every now and again once I moved to my new job, because that's how I knew how to make friends. That's how I knew how to socialise. But I wasn't going every week, and I was withdrawing from it, and it felt like freedom at first, complete and utter freedom, that I could think for myself, I could do what I wanted. I didn't have to relate to a higher being about what I thought. There was, I didn't have to feel guilty for not believing anything. I could just believe what I wanted and let everything else go. But it didn't stay like that, and I'm forever grateful, actually, that sense of freedom I felt at first when I stopped believing went. And in a split second, one day, I suddenly realised I was missing God. And at that point, what felt like freedom started feeling like captivity. And it felt like those chains that your friends described. I actually felt like I was wearing them again. Once I realised I missed God, it was just awful, because I missed a being I no longer believed in. And that's when I started seriously seeking for him again. I thought, I have got to work out for myself, is there a God or isn't there a God? And if there is a God, I want to believe in him and I want to give my life to him. And if there isn't a God, I'm going to completely walk away and let it go. But I wasn't banking on missing him.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Amazing Grace by Darlene Check. This is The Exchange. Thank you for tuning in. If you've just joined us, our guest is Lynda Alsford, a Church Army evangelist who temporarily lost her faith. She's the author of the book He Never Let Go, which you can buy in all the usual places. Let's go back to the conversation I recently had with Lynda now. I continued by asking her if, looking back, she wished that she'd prepared better for her time of doubting.
I think there is ways of being more prepared. I think it would be good if churches could be more open, if you like, to doubt. I think sometimes we get scared of it, and we don't allow people to really talk about it. I think if I'd been able to talk about the doubts more when they were happening and be completely honest about what I was feeling emotionally as well, because something that I've learned since I've come back to faith is that my faith and my feelings are completely separate. I can choose to believe or choose not to believe, and my feelings can be doing something completely different. I can be feeling really sad, but choosing to believe in the goodness and love of God. And sometimes I think we get scared as a wider church of actually allowing people to really grapple with doubt and what it means. And once you really start grappling with something yourself, I think God has a way of stepping into those doubts when you start dialoguing and really talking it through with someone. And prayer, of course. You can always tell God you don't believe in him when you're starting to doubt, is actually talking to God himself and saying, Lord, help me, I'm starting to doubt you, so that you're keeping the lines of communication with God open all the time.
And Lynda, you mentioned earlier in the interview that one of the reasons that doubts started to crop up was your whole relationship with God over singleness and not being married. How do you feel about that now? Is that still a struggle, or has God helped you to deal with that?
Bit of both, really. I think there's still times when it's painful, but I've learnt to accept certain things. And I think one of the turning points in that for me was accepting that we all suffer pain, that the life of the Christian isn't meant to be easy, and we all suffer. My suffering is unwanted long-term singleness and therefore childlessness. Somebody else might suffer by going through divorce. Others might suffer by long-term illness. You know, we all suffer in different ways, and as a church, in an ideal situation, we would be supporting one another through our different times of suffering. And when I realised that being a Christian didn't give me an automatic right to everything happening the way I wanted it to, it actually made life a lot easier. And I can start looking at the positive sides, that I have more time to spend with God. I can enjoy my nieces and nephews and my godchildren, and I get to give them back, which is something I've learnt as an act of my will, looking at the positive sides of my life as it is, rather than always focusing on the negative, counting my blessings, waking up in the morning and trying to think, okay, God, what can I be grateful for? And I can be grateful for a good many things as a single person, the freedom it gives to work for the Lord, soul control, you know, the remote control, you get sole possession of it. You know, there's all sorts of little things that you can give thanks to God for. And it's just learning as an act of my will to thank God for the things he's given me. And in the end, my viewpoint starts changing and I start accepting it. But it's been a hard journey. I've really learnt a lot about allowing God to share our burdens rather than me trying to do it alone, and make God give me a husband and children, or take away the desire for a husband and children in a split second. Actually, I've learned to depend on him. I've learned for him to be my rock in hard times, which ultimately is what he wants us to do, is to completely depend on him.
When I was lost, you came and rescued me. Reached down into the pit and lifted me. Oh, Lord, such love. I was as far from you as I could be.
Well, Lynda, you're the first person I think I've spoken to and interviewed that has two testimonies. I kind of think that's quite nice. So just as a final question, can you talk us through those moments that you came back to faith? How did you feel about it?
I finally came to a point when I decided I cannot reason God into existence. I knew that suddenly, I've gradually realised over Christmas 2010 that it had to be a choice, and that faith is a choice, that reason takes me so far, but then faith has to take over, and I have to just choose as an act of my will that I'm going to believe in God. And the split second I prayed again, Lord, I've decided that you exist, and I want to give my life to you. The feelings of faith came back again, and I just got flooded with peace once more. And I just knew I'd done the right thing. I just knew again that there was a God. All that I just know in my knower, that all came back to me in that moment when I surrendered my life again to God. And a few months after that, I'd been praying quite a bit about being more aware of God's love, because my knowledge of God's love was very much head knowledge. And I knew I wanted it to go deeper into my heart and to be aware at very much a deeper level of the love of God. And I was praying that God would show me. And I was praying in tears at times, Lord, please help me to understand your love and to really be aware of your love. And one night while I was asleep, I had a dream. And in this dream, I was getting ready to go on a journey with friends, and we were getting into one of these old VW camper vans. And as we were just loading up our luggage into this van, I looked up, and in the corner I saw Jesus. And he was looking at me with such love. And in this dream, I knew I had never been loved the way Jesus loved me. And I could see that love, and I felt it at a heart level like I've never felt it before. And I just rushed over to him, and like a child with a father, he just hugged me. And I just knew I was loved. And when I woke up, that same knowledge of being loved at heart level was still there, and it's remained ever since.
Lynda Alsford there, today's special guest in The Exchange. Lynda's book is called He Never Let Go, and it's available in all the usual places, online or in your local Christian bookstore. I'm sure you can order the book from there or from a normal high street bookstore. Lynda Alsford, thank you very much for joining us here on The Exchange. Remember, you can download this episode right now from twr.org.uk.